Tonight, debate night in America. We head to Atlanta ahead of tonight's much-anticipated matchup between presidential hopefuls. Plus, a major decision. The Supreme Court clears the way for emergency abortions in Idaho. And China's crackdown on dissidents on foreign soil.
This is not an allegation we're making. This is what their official documents state.
What Beijing is doing to silence those who speak out, and what's being done to stop it. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. We are just hours away from the blockbuster presidential debate tonight between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. From our studio in Washington, I'm Tara Mergener. The candidates are set to take the stage in a first-of-its-kind debate event. Two men, two moderators, and a mute button. To add to the unprecedented nature, the unusually early time in the election cycle, this is happening. Neither the president or the former president is their party's official nominee. With that backdrop, both men have made their way to Atlanta for tonight's debate. That is where we also find CBN's George Thomas. George, boy, so much at stake tonight. Tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you set the picture right now, the incumbent president, President Biden, should be leading in the polls, but the national opinion polls show that these two main contenders are neck and neck. In fact, in 5 of the 7 key critical states, including Georgia, the former president Donald Trump is actually leading here as well as in Georgia. We've got some major issues from immigration to abortion to the economy, how things are going. There's a lot to discuss. And then keep in mind something that is always, that's in the foreground as well as in the background. There's this whole idea about the age of these two candidates, Biden being 81, the former president being 78. Keep in mind, these are the 2 oldest men who are seeking the highest office in our country. And there's been a lot of talk about Biden's physical stamina and his mental capacity to go on for another 4 years. Obviously, there's been some talk about the former president as well and his issues. But these are the issues. This is the stage that we have this evening. It's prime time, 9 o'clock, not too far away from us. And it's the polls show about 60% of Americans are going to be watching this historic debate just for the nature, because keep in mind, this is the first time in last 4 years that these two men are going to be on the same stage for 90 minutes.
You know, George, nothing is typical about tonight's debate. So there's a number of things that look different. What are they compared to past debates?
Yeah, the Presidential Commission on Debates, they've historically taken an active role in preparing these debates. This is the first time that they're not going to be involved since 1986. The other important factor is that, as you mentioned at the top of the show, since 1960, never have we had debates this early in the election cycle. And in fact, both candidates haven't been officially nominated to their party. The debate happening a couple of blocks from here in prime time in a studio. There's going to be no audience, no opening statement. And one of the most unusual aspects, the rules that actually both campaigns have agreed to, is that when the other person is speaking, the opponent will have his mic muted. In fact, just before coming on the air, I had a chance to look at what this sounds like, and it's going to be quite dramatic, especially if you have both the men side by side and one of them is speaking and the other is trying to interrupt. You can barely hear the person. So that's going to be something very interesting to watch.
Absolutely. And George, just a little bit of time left. Talk about the running mate factor in all of this for Donald Trump. How much anticipation do you think this is going to be a big deal tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, this morning, the report is that the Trump campaign sent out the following email. Do you want to see my vice president at the debate? They could be there, but you'll never know it until I make the official VP announcement. That coming from the Trump campaign this morning. The rumors are the 3 top contenders, Marco Rubio of Florida, Doug Bergman of North Dakota, and J.D. Vance of Ohio are going to be around in the audience and perhaps in the spin room. Right. Those are the 3 top candidates that their names have been floated. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens indeed. Thank you, George. Stay cool. All right, with us now is Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, also our Faith Nation contributor. Nathan, some really interesting poll numbers going into this debate. George mentioned this quickly, including a poll that shows 16% of Americans who plan to watch tonight are actually open to changing their vote. That seems like a lot of wiggle room here. With so much at stake, what do you think the candidates are doing right now to prepare for this debate?
Well, I think they're probably trying to rest and relax a little bit. This is like studying for an exam in college or high school, where if you don't know the material by now, you're probably not going to know it. So the best thing to do is go with your best, physical foot forward, and try and pull this off, because this is going to be a marathon rather than a sprint.
Yeah, what do you think of that 16% number? That seems, it's hard to believe that many people are undecided and the debate could actually affect their opinions. Your thoughts?
Correct. Yeah, this is a debate between two very defined and known individuals. I'm skeptical that many people are willing to change their mind. But I think when pollsters ask that question, or when people hear that question, they want to be viewed as open-minded, right? They don't want to be viewed as being a lockstep, straight down the line ticket voter. They want to be viewed as independent and open-minded. And so I think that's where you're getting some additional people in there.
Right. And so this is interesting, too, because the cat's out of the bag with many media reports about the Biden campaign's strategy for pushing President Trump's buttons tonight to try to throw him off his game, reportedly with insults and calling him a loser. What do you think of this strategy?
Well, we'll see if that ends up being the strategy, right? At some of this, there's a little bit of gamesmanship before the debate, that sometimes you want to leak material or leak strategies out in order to get the other side to prepare for that game plan, but then come with another game plan. So we'll see if that's the tactic that the president ends up using. The stakes are high for President Biden, but also the expectations are low. The Republicans have done a pretty good job of setting the bar so low that if the president can come out and keep himself together for 90 minutes, he could end up doing pretty well. But by the end of the day, Tara, tomorrow, the candidate we are talking about tomorrow, I think, is the candidate who has lost the debate, because they're the one who has said something or done something that is out of the norm or outside the boundaries of what they were supposed to be doing. And I think that's like this whole election, that each party should want the voters to be focused on the other person, because the other candidate has so much baggage that they're bringing to the table.
All right, Nathan, we've got like 20 seconds left. Give me the best thing each candidate can do on that stage tonight.
Keep the attention on the other person. Don't make, you want to win, but you also want to win by not making a mistake. And when you make a mistake by by saying something or
right,
losing where you are, you want to keep that focus on your opponent.
Don't make a mistake. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Nathan Gonzalez, thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk again soon.
We'll see you soon.
All right, thanks. All right, well, abortion is expected to be a key issue in tonight's debate after the Supreme Court cleared the way for hospitals in Idaho to perform emergency abortions. The official ruling followed an accidental online posting of the opinion yesterday and was quickly taken down. CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson is here now with more on what this ruling means. Lori.
Well, Tara, it means this case is far from over and even could eventually return to the High Court at a later date.
Although justices agreed to take the Biden administration case challenging Idaho's abortion ban, they ultimately decided to send it back to the lower courts. Justice Barrett, joined by Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh, wrote, "Dismissing the case now makes sense because the contours of the issue have changed in the last several months." She points out revisions Idaho made to its law and how the Biden administration clarified some of its original statements. The state law allows abortion only if the mother's life is in danger. The Biden administration argues federal law supersedes the state law, requiring emergency rooms to stabilize patients to the point where abortion should be required to protect a woman's health, not just her life. Justice Alito, author of the decision overturning Roe v. Wade, joined by Justices Neil Gorsuch and Clarence Thomas, suggested the court side with Idaho, stating federal health care law conclusively shows that it does not require hospitals to perform abortions. Justices Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor, however, sided with the Biden administration. This led the court to temporarily rule that Idaho must allow emergency abortions to save the mother's health, not just her life.
So the three who say it's premature and the three who say the federal government wins combines to be the 6 justices who say we're done. We're backing out of this. We're going to allow the federal statute to preempt the state statute for now, with 3 dissenters.
The dismissal is seen as a win for the Biden administration, with the president issuing a statement saying no woman should be denied care, made to wait until she's near death, or forced to flee her home state just to receive the health care she needs. Demonstrators outside the court had mixed reactions.
It's a null and void issue today. I mean, so they didn't make a decision.
This is a long fight because the decision went back to the state courts.
Nobody lost here. What we've seen is basically a stalemate.
Pro-life organizations still hope the case will ultimately be decided in Idaho's favor due to the federal law's language.
In that law specifically, it mentions not just stabilizing care for women, but also stabilizing care for the unborn child. So the unborn child is explicitly protected in that federal law.
Many other pro-life organizations weighed in today on the Supreme Court ruling in similar ways, stating their belief that the Idaho abortion law should and will ultimately prevail, even if that means returning to this conservative-led Supreme Court. Tara.
All right, Lori, thank you. Many moving parts indeed. Well, turning now to the Middle East, Israel is urging Palestinians in Gaza City to move south as troops pound the area to stamp out a Hamas resurgence there. Israeli media report the terror group is regaining control of the city after being driven out months earlier. Meanwhile, the U.S. is struggling to deliver humanitarian aid to desperate Palestinians.
The security challenges throughout Gaza right now are the general sense of lawlessness and the fact that it continues to be a combat zone. There are opportunities when the drivers will get stuck at checkpoints. There are opportunities where humanitarians will be caught in a crossfire between the two parties to the conflict. And there is a sense of desperation by those on the ground that see trucks and need that assistance.
Aid groups are warning that Gaza's humanitarian crisis will grow more dire if supplies cannot be distributed. Talks to secure a ceasefire hostage deal are at a stalemate. Hamas is demanding that Israel completely withdraw from Gaza, while Israel says it will only agree to temporary pauses in the fighting until Hamas is destroyed. Coming up, migrants smuggled across the southern border. Now, there are fears they could pose a terror threat in the U.S. And welcome back. Every alarm is flashing red. That is the warning from Capitol Hill following reports of an ISIS-affiliated network smuggling migrants right here into the U.S. While Homeland Security officials insist there is no imminent threat, they admit some individuals may match the terrorism watch list. National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with the latest. Caitlin, what do we know about these people?
Tara, the Department of Homeland Security has reportedly identified over 400 immigrants smuggled in by this terrorist-affiliated network, a majority of them from Central Asia. About 150 have been arrested, and the whereabouts of many others are at least known. 50 of them, however, remain at large.
This is a national security risk and a direct result of Joe Biden's failed far-left Democrat open border policies.
Republicans say this latest development comes as no surprise. House Homeland Security Committee Chairman Representative Mark Green saying in a statement, quote, "My committee has long warned that this administration's open borders agenda is bringing bad actors into the homeland in droves. This is unacceptable, preventable, and absolutely terrifying." While Republicans blast the Biden administration, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is pushing back, saying Wednesday DHS has not confirmed the NBC News report that the 400 individuals have ties to ISIS.
Individuals who are identified to have those ties would pose a concern to us from a public safety and a security perspective, and they would be priorities for detention and removal.
Officials quoted in the story point out they have no indication these migrants have plans to carry out terrorism. Still, there's an abundance of caution. These latest concerns come just weeks after the arrest of 8 Tajikistan nationals with ties to ISIS. They all illegally crossed the southern border.
These were terrorists that the Biden policies welcomed into our country.
The safety and security of the American public is indeed our highest priority. We screen and vet individuals when we encounter them. If we learn of derogatory information subsequently, later in the process, then we take enforcement action accordingly.
House Speaker Mike Johnson hopes the House passes the DHS funding bill, which largely focuses on the border this week. Democrats, however, say it's full of conservative priorities that will likely cause it to stall out in the Senate. Tara?
All right, Caitlin, thank you. Well, up next, a spy network on a mission to silence Chinese dissidents. A look at how they're operating in the U.S. when Faith Nation returns. And welcome back. Threatening, entrapping, and even kidnapping. That is what a vast network of spies is doing to critics of the Chinese government. And that's happening right here in the U.S. CBN's Dale Hurd spoke to a former member of China's secret police for this exclusive report.
This is the first former member of China's secret police to speak publicly about Beijing's active campaign to silence Chinese pro-democracy voices overseas. Calling himself Eric, he was an agent for China's Ministry of Public Security, or First Bureau, from 2008 until last year, when he defected to Australia.
My job was to collect the intelligence about the country I was in and the anti-communist groups there. I was supposed to infiltrate these groups, make friends, and trap targets for return to China.
Eric was coerced into becoming an agent in 2008 after his arrest for supporting a pro-democracy party and given a choice: help the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, catch dissidents abroad or go to jail. He chose the former, taking on fake identities such as a property executive and an anti-communist freedom fighter to lure dissidents to countries where they could be abducted and returned to China. But because he secretly protected targets and says no one was arrested because of his work, he was concerned his handlers would become suspicious, and he decided to defect.
I didn't want to be responsible for any targets being returned to China. And I tried to make sure that it did not happen. And this made my bosses suspicious of me.
Eric's testimony confirms our reporting and the reports of others that a Chinese government spy network is threatening, entrapping, and even kidnapping critics of the Chinese Communist government.
These are kind of the methods being used by the CCP. Again, this is not an allegation we're making. This is what their official documents state.
Laura Harth, who tracks Chinese transnational repression for the human rights group Safeguard Defenders, says we can assume there are agents like Eric operating in the U.S. But these CCP agents are only part of a larger campaign by the Chinese government called the United Front.
So the United Front is something that's being defined by the Chinese Communist Party as one of its secret or magic weapons. And essentially its task is two things. On the one hand, expand the so-called circle of friends of the Chinese Communist Party. So co-opting or influencing politicians, media, academia, entrepreneurs. But on the other hand, and this is something that is often overlooked when we talk about United Front, its task is also to crack down on critics, right? To silence them, to divide them.
An Amnesty International survey of Chinese students in 24 universities in Europe and North America found that many live in fear of surveillance, harassment, or intimidation by Chinese agents. It's unclear how many of the so-called Chinese police stations used to control dissidents are still operating in the U.S. On paper, it might be less than 5. The one above a noodle shop in New York we showed you last year was finally shut down by authorities.
Police stations, or so-called police stations, is really the tip of the iceberg. We need to take a broad view and understand what the wider picture looks like and the amount of proxies and networks that the Chinese Party state is operating.
Bob Fu, the founder and president of the Texas-based ministry China Aid, helped lead the 1989 Tiananmen Square protest as a student. He still faces harassment by Chinese agents 35 years later.
Recent few months, even, I had been harassed and receiving threats with text messages, and also CCP agents booked hotels under my name and then called the police from New York to Los Angeles, from Washington, D.C. to Houston, basically for bomb threats. Said Bob Fu was about to set off bombs.
Pro-democracy activist Li Jianji in Los Angeles, who Chinese agents have tried to kill 3 times, told us Chinese Americans are still surrounded by constant threat of danger. In a special message to his former colleagues still trying to harass and trap Chinese dissidents, Eric encouraged them to recognize the nature of the Communist Party, that it's a fascist, totalitarian party, and that carrying out these illegal and secret activities in various countries is not good for them, and he challenges them to instead do something good for human civilization. Beijing's continued repression of overseas Chinese begs the question, if those Chinese who fled communism for freedom still live in fear of the Chinese Communist Party, are they really free? Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And finally tonight, a new technology is making it possible for doctors to be in 2 places at once, at least a 3D version of them anyway. Crescent Regional Hospital in North Texas recently debuted the HoloBox, making them the first medical center in the country to use holographic technology. Now, this tool allows doctors to step into a room with a camera, mic, and monitor, and then appear to their patient in a life-size projection. The HoloBox could be used for pre-op, post-op, or even in the emergency room. By cutting out the driving time for doctors going between hospitals, they are hoping it could help lessen wait times and connect patients with their doctors faster. I'm trying to wrap my head around that one. I think I'd like my doctor in person. That's going to do it for Faith Nation tonight. We will see you tomorrow.